I have not been obsessed with the fantasy series since I picked up The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan back in like 2000 until now. But even though I'm obsessed with the new fantasy series, at the same time, quite frankly, there's something unsettling about it. And today we're talking about that. Hello, and welcome back to the Book Love Podcast, where I dive into and beyond the pages in front of me. I am your host, Matt from Ohio, and recently I read Timebound by Sara Samuels. Today, I'm here with a review, rating, recommendation, and as always, thoughts and opinions on all of it. So let's get into it. Firstly, what is this thing even about? Timebound is the third novel in the Blade of Shadows series, in which individuals born in complete darkness during a solar eclipse are born with the gift of time travel. But when they're born, there is a corresponding darkness that is created, and that darkness hunts them down and seeks to just kind of raise hell across time. Timeborns are tasked with destroying that darkness. Timebound was originally published in March of 2024, and it is a fantasy novel that's a part of an epic fantasy thriller, time-traveling, romantic-esque series of books. The ebook version I read is almost 600 pages, like 590, something like that. I read it in 4 days, and if I'm going to be honest with you, that was due to some dedication. And I would advise you to maybe take a few more days than that. Maybe spread that book over 5 or 6 or even 7 days so you can truly digest what's happened. But what is the book itself about? Well, so Timebound picks up right where book 2 ends. There's like zero pause, right? Olivia and her sister Emily are running for their lives, relentlessly pursued by Balthazar, who, in case you forgot, unalived their mother. Roman, meanwhile, is stuck in the 21st century in Seattle, and therefore only one man can help Olivia and Emily, and his name is Ian Malik. He is a man full of secrets and mystique that Olivia is inexplicably drawn and attracted to. Malik is the keeper of Olivia's mother's journal, a journal which Olivia reads and discovers family and like some world-altering secrets. But she also uncovers clues that could lead to ultimately defeating Balthazar and finding peace. And coincidentally, Malik has a plan to help her do just that. They time travel back to the 16th century in Italy, where even more secrets come to light, and a secret society called the Time Hunters, whose entire purpose is to hunt and unalive time travelers, is ruling supreme. So now is the time where I usually give my review, rating, and recommendation. And to be honest, the rating and the recommendation are super easy, but the review wasn't so easy. And actually, this might be the hardest book review I've ever written. Have you ever read something that's just the most amazing thing ever? It blows your socks off, but you like can't put your finger on why. Like you feel it. You feel how good it is. Thoughts swirl in your brain, and then you try to say those thoughts out loud, and your brain is suddenly empty. And because you can't put your finger on it, you just sort of feel uneasy and weird. Well, that's a good way to sum up my feelings about Timebound. So the review might be a little bit more difficult to put into words, but the rating and the recommendation are not. So let's jump into that. Let's start with a very straightforward question. How does this book compare to the rest of the series that I've read so far? Well, book 1, Timeborn, is definitely an introduction book. It It introduces the characters, gives you the tip of the iceberg for the world and the magic system. It's more concerned with setting up thoughts and feelings and relationships, right? Book two, Darkness of Time, expands on all of that. If I'm going to be honest, now that I've read book three, book two is another introduction book without being obvious about it, right? The cast of characters is expanded. You meet more people. Their relationships are deepened and more meaningful. The magic system begins to expand and be fleshed out. The world feels bigger. It feels more lived in. It feels more dangerous. But all of that is intro to prepare you for the real plot, the real why. And that is really what Timebound is. It is plot explosion. Book three takes off like a rocket ship and does a whole hell of a lot. This book lets you know that this series is indeed a fully fledged epic fantasy journey, which is not something that I really thought of for the first two books. Like you can have a fantasy saga without it being epic fantasy, right? So, of the first three books, I think that Timebound, this one, is the best story of all three. I think maybe of these three books, book two may have been written slightly better. I'll get into that a little bit later. Like in Timebound, the characters become onions, the magic system is explained a lot more deeply, and the plot explodes. Um, but I still don't think it's a match for Rise of the Shadow Lords, the prequel novel. Although I I wonder if any of the books in the series can be a match for Rise of the Shadow Lords. All that being said, um, I rated Timebound at a solid 4. But like I've said many times, star ratings don't mean anything. So let's talk about the reasons why I gave it a 4, and you can make up your own mind. And in so doing, I'm not going to purposefully spoil the plot. I might be talking about relationships and events that occur, but I won't spoil the plot. So you've been warned. I can't guarantee that this is spoiler free for everybody. But that being said, I want to start with the negatives, right? We're going to end with some positivity and pensive reflection. So let's start with some negativity. There are two things I wish this book had done ever so slightly differently. Ever so slightly. The first is concerning the magic system. Time travel doesn't fully make sense to me. Maybe it's not that time travel doesn't make sense. It's how everybody uses time travel that doesn't fully make sense to me. Okay, in this book, we learn that the Shadowborns, or the Darknesses, time travel in the exact same way that a Timeborn does. They have a dagger, and they use it with the ancient words at the full moon. The catch is they're not born with a dagger. They have to unalive their corresponding Timeborn and acquire that dagger. And I think this is the hitch and the reasoning I have in my brain, right? So I could talk ad nauseum about this, but I'm just going to try to boil my thoughts down into a single example. Olivia's Shadowborn is named Dahlia, and Dahlia shows up in book 1 in ancient Rome, and then again in book 2 in 1812 AD North America. How? That's the question. How does a Shadowborn travel through time in order to unalive their Timeborn for the express purpose of acquiring that Timeborn's dagger, which will then give them the ability to time travel? I need somebody to explain this to me. Am I imagining some type of circular logic here? I don't know. Um, is it possible that another Shadowborn like Balthazar was bringing Dahlia along for the ride? Maybe. Is there another? But at this point in time, we don't have an explanation. So the only thing my brain can go to is this circular reasoning. But even on top of that, I guess a second example is Shadowborns like Malik and Balthazar are able to just disappear and reappear in the same room. Now, I've read Rise of the Shadow Lords, and I can totally understand that this is a shadow magic thing, right? But if you haven't read the prequel novel, then it sort of kind of feels like Shadowborns can do micro time travel where they're traveling a nanosecond into the future and only 5 feet away. And they're doing it without the use of the dagger at the full moon. Okay. Do these gaps that I think I see affect the narrative or plot? No, absolutely not. And because it's a fantasy story, we can always just say because hashtag magic, but I sure wish I had an answer. You know what I mean? The second thing that I wish was massaged ever so slightly does, in my opinion, affect the narrative and plot. And it's the ending of the book. And no, I am not referencing the big, huge plot twist reveals that occur at the end. I'm talking more about pacing. Listen, for me, for my reading experience, the last 15% of this book is a very different pace than the previous 85% of the book. A lot of time elapses, a lot of traveling occurs. It all happens very quickly, and a shit ton of stuff happens, right? I am not an easily confused dude, but I did find myself becoming lost several times. Like, whose POV am I reading? Where are we in the timeline? Where are we on the damn continent? I think that the last 15% of this book could have benefited from like 25 or 50 more pages. They would have been spread out. It would have allowed this section to breathe a bit more. It would have helped massage the passage of time, etc. Now, I realize that we are already talking about a 600-page book and people don't want to make it longer. But who cares? Who cares? Listen, if I'm looking to pick up a 200-page romance novel for the beach, I care about page count. If I'm picking up a book that's already 600, 700, 800 pages long, I don't care about page count. I'm invested, you know? That's my opinion there. But um I can say that I do think that both of these two negatives that I experienced are really more things that I wish for perfection rather than actual complaints or things that I think hold the book back. So let's talk about things that I loved about the book. I plumbed the depths of my brain and soul to think about things that make this book specifically stand out. And that was really difficult for a moment because I kept thinking about things. I'm like, well, book one was really good with that. And book two was really, really good with that. Um, so if you want to hear more of those kind of thoughts, you can read or you can watch some reviews for book one or book two. I'll link book two here. Um, but I'll touch on them very quickly, very concisely. I really like her writing style. I like how she constructs sentences. I like uh, her description, how she uses metaphors and similes and analogies and then add adjectives and add adverbs. Um, I really like the way she writes spicy scenes. I actually think, for my money, Sara Samuels' spicy scenes might be my favorite. I really like how she writes violence. She really makes you feel it. But again, I talked about those things when I reviewed Darkness of Time. So go listen to that review and you'll hear more thoughts on that. Specifically for this book, though, after much reflection, I came up with a couple of things. The first thing that really makes Timebound stand out from other books in this series and other fantasy books in general are the plot twists. There are so many plot twists. And I've seen that some people have call Sara Samuels the plot twist queen. It's pretty well deserved, if I'm going to be honest with you. Pretty well deserved. I've personally found that many authors and writers confuse plot twists with info dumps. They hold the narrative hostage so that you as a reader don't know what's going on, and then they provide information later on. And I have a big beef with that. Sara Samuels does not do that, though. Sara gives you a masterclass in plot twists. In this book, the characters and the plot of this novel actively lead you to believe things. And the things that you believe are always logic based. They are narrative glue. They link characters, events, and even history together. The things you believe actually inform the character's psychological profile and motivations. And then all of that gets taken away and you learn something completely different that is just as logical, that is just as rationally sound, that explains everything even more so than what you thought you knew. And Sara also sprinkles them throughout the book. She doesn't just let you read 80% of the book and then throw plot twist after plot twist at you in the last 20%. She sprinkles them pretty evenly throughout. All books are going to be a little plot twist heavy at the end, but Timebound, masterclass in plot twists. Masterclass. The second thing that really stood out to me about Timebound compared to the other books in this series that I've read so far and other epic fantasy is in Timebound, we finally get the idea that Olivia and Roman are chosen ones. Like you cannot have an epic fantasy without a chosen one, and chosen ones come in all shapes and sizes. But they almost have one thing in common: chosen ones save the world. But as far as the reader knows, at this point in the Blade of Shadows saga, Olivia and Roman are not saving the world. As far as we know, Shadowborns and Time Hunters are explicitly trying to exterminate the Timeborns. And thus, our chosen ones are saving themselves and other Timeborns, but not. I really like this for two reasons. The first is because it almost, as a reader, it makes the story hit closer to home. We live our everyday lives, and it's very difficult to imagine saving the cosmos. But it's a lot easier to imagine self survival, self-preservation. So this makes the story hit closer to home, but also it's easier to understand because the enemy is not some cosmic entity. Our chosen ones don't need to level up so much. They don't need to have access to otherworldly cosmic powers to learn. Like they can just do, right. But this is not the end of the story. And that leads kind of to my second reason why I love how we understand chosen ones within Timebound. Listen, I can feel it in my bones that our chosen ones will be saving the world. That is what Olivia and Roman will be doing. I feel it in my bones that our big bad Balthazar is just a pawn in a much larger 3D chess game. And because of that, I'm currently obsessed with trying to figure out what this bigger picture is. which means when I step back and think about it, I'm obsessed with a story that doesn't exist in my world yet because I'm obsessed with a story that does exist. And that is some meta stuff that just blows my mind. But even though I'm completely obsessed with this at this point, I couldn't help but feel sort of uneasy about it. And I couldn't put my finger on why I feel weird about the Blade of Shadow series after the third book for a few days. But I finally came um, down from the huge high that the book leads you with, and I figured out my feelings. So I want to tell you why I feel weird about the Blade of Shadows series, but why that's also, I think, ultimately a good thing. At first, I tried to tell myself that something was missing from the books. And I tried to do really basic things. For example, I tried to blame the author. I tried to tell myself that Sara Samuels just doesn't have the maturity or the polish that other epic fantasy writers have. But that's not it. That's she she definitely has the skill. What's creating the unease in the pit of my stomach with Timebound and the Blade of Shadows world more broadly is not a lack of skill or maturity from Sara Samuels. It's a lack of perceptible scope. Allow me to explain. Okay. In classic epic fantasy, there is an immediate sense that the world is old and that it is big. Do me a favor, think about Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, Sword of Truth, etc. In classic fantasy, the classic epic fantasy, magic predates our characters. History exists whether we're told about it or not. Belief systems feel complete, they feel settled, they feel passed down through generations. So, because of that, anytime we encounter gaps, they immediately feel like a gap in the character's understanding as opposed to a gap in the world itself or the magic system. But that's not what's happening in Blade of Shadows. In Blade of Shadows, the characters are ripped out of their original context, their original worlds, and they're dropped into a reality and magic system world that they don't understand. They didn't even know it existed, which means that their inner lives, their inner monologue cannot reflect a larger sense of scale, history, magic, belief systems, whatever, which means we don't get to know about it. And that's because our characters genuinely don't know anything. The result is not the broken world building or magic system building that I thought it was. I think the result is a discovery style narrative where the readers and the characters are learning things piece by piece in real time. In classic fantasy, our chosen ones are more or less always going after the same end goal, right? Ridding the world of the ultimate big bad. The journey we read for those characters is one of like discovering magical abilities, learning information, finding puzzle pieces that all fit together that get them to this end goal of ridding the world of the ultimate big bad. But in the Blade of Shadows series, our chosen ones don't even know who the F the ultimate big bad is. And neither do we, right? They, therefore we, are discovering scope as we go along, not just the puzzle pieces that help explain the scope. It is literally a true discovery journey style of storytelling. And to be clear, I'm not trying to say this is bad. No. It does create a different reading experience, one that I'm not accustomed to, one that makes me feel uncomfortable at times. especially because I didn't really understand what I was reading until recently. And because of that, now that I'm coming to grips and understanding with it, on some level, it feels like Sara Samuels is almost reinventing epic fantasy. And I say that because I have literally never read another epic fantasy series that is this like discrete level of discovery. It feels very uncomfortable to my academic mind, but to my soul, it is one of the most amazing literary experiences that I've had. So, all that being said, my recommendation for Timebound is that yes, you should read this book. Read it. In my humble opinion, it fully cements the Blade of Shadows series as being a top tier epic fantasy series, and you should read it, but only after you read book 1 and book 2, and potentially the prequel if you want to do that. So, there's not much more to say. So, I think I'll go ahead and put a bookmark in it for now. But as always, let me know what you thought. What do you like about Timebound? What went well for you? Are there anything that you might massage a little bit? I would love to know. I want to know if I'm alone in this opinion or not. If you like, leave a comment. If you'd like to contact me more directly, I'll leave all of my contact information in the description down below. So I am going to go and pick up book 4, Wicked Lovers of Time, and I will be back with another review in the Blade of Shadows series. Until next time, cheers.